Doctor Nurse Podcast fam! Welcome to another episode of the Doctor Nurse Podcast. This week on the podcast, if you read the title, we're going to be talking about a subject that I feel like it's time to talk on and it's time to approach the subject. The topic might be a little controversial, and I'm okay with that. I think it's okay we talk about things that might be a little tough or uncomfortable. So I'm going to bring up this subject today and we'll see how it goes. But before we get started, I wanted to remind you guys that last week on the podcast, I had on Ron DeRico, and he's a doctorally prepared MBA nurse practitioner in psych mental health and ER medicine. And he came on and chatted about your mindset regarding your nursing career. And the episode is fantastic because it really touches on the importance of developing a mindset of growth and seeing opportunities all around you. It really goes back to having an abundance mindset and really seeing the plethora of options and not necessarily seeing the field of nursing as having limitations or that there's not enough to go around. I also felt like the episode really challenged your thought process on how you design your career. I really want to challenge nurses and nurse practitioners to view their degrees and education, as well as the certifications, as a way to create different streams of income. Now, you diversify your financial portfolio, which is actually another episode that I had on even before Roan about the financial aspect of starting side hustles. The point of diversifying your financial portfolio is to mitigate risk. Right? So just like they say, don't buy all of one stock in a company, like all Tesla stock or something like that, because if Tesla stock goes down, then you're all in. But if you diversify your money and you kind of have more of a mutual fund approach, then you've got more investing in multiple companies. And so if something were to happen, the market were to fall, or one company would have a bad day, you wouldn't lose everything. So you're diversifying your risk, right? And I want the same for nurses in their careers. I think a way to prevent burnout and to not be beholden at the mercy of just one place to work, you need to create multiple streams of income. It also allows you to step into learning more about who you are, what you might be better at, what you enjoy about one job compared to another. And in those different fields, you might be able to find holes or problems that you might be able to improve upon. And you can even create something or allow yourself to be creative and express yourself in a different way. I think that change of pace, seeing things differently, doing something else, inventing, creating, these are all facets of our personality that we may or may not have developed or underdeveloped, and that the side hustle game, especially in nursing, really allows you to step into those spaces. So again, listen to that episode if you haven't. I think that you're really going to enjoy that episode. If you haven't, I would stop right now, go back, listen to it, or make sure you do it after today's episode because it's really a good one. And guys, listen to all the episodes that I have. I mean, I have so many podcast episodes on career development, side hustle ideas, health and wellness. I've got a myriad of topics for nurses that are tailored to help you grow yourself, not just in your career, but the whole person. Check out the podcast episodes, share it with a friend if you like what I'm doing here. And then, leave a review for the podcast. I'd love a 5-star review if you like this podcast. And then if you have suggestions or something you think you want to share with me, just email me, drnursepodcast@gmail.com. I respond to all of them. It takes me a while being a busy mom of 2, but I do get back to you guys. So send me a message if you got something you want to share with me. So let's dive in. For today's topic, and what I really want to talk about stems back to the title of my podcast. The title of my podcast, as you know, is Doctor Nurse Podcast. And the reason that I chose that was because I wish it was some fancy story, but it literally was just because a friend of mine would call me Doctor Nurse, and it was just a funny way he would describe what I had accomplished in my career by earning that doctoral degree in nursing. I've made it my mission to pursue a doctoral level understanding of career options, development opportunities for nurses and nurse practitioners away from the bedside, and capturing the mindset that you need to launch yourself away from the bedside. So that's another vein of how that name, I feel like, kind of pertains to what I'm doing. However, so many people have taken an issue with nurse practitioners using the term doctor to reference themselves. And I wanted to touch on this topic in today's podcast because it appears that now 3 nurse practitioners have decided to sue the state of California over concerns for freedom of speech. So it's taken an even worse turn, and I think it's something that maybe it's time for me to comment on and kind of figure out how we feel about it. I can share how I feel about it, but I of course want to hear how you guys feel about it too. So please reach out to me if at the end of today's podcast you have thoughts, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about it and why you agree or disagree. Let's take it from the top. So there was a recent case that occurred in California with a nurse practitioner named Sarah Ernie, who earned her doctorate from Vanderbilt. She opened up a holistic women's healing clinic in 2018. She was running that until March of 2022, which is when she ended up getting fined. She became the target of the district attorney's office. So and I'm getting this information from nurse.org, which I'll link the episode in the show notes, but that's where I'm pulling all this information from. The district attorney stated that Mrs. Ernie failed to advise the public that she was not a medical doctor and failed to identify her supervising physician. She added to the lack of clarity by referencing herself as Dr. Sarah online, and that she did not mention that she was a nurse. She was then fined a total of $20,000 and told to remove the doctor title from all of her accounts, advertisements, social media, everything. Because of the investigation, she was advised to close her clinic, and this led to the subsequent closure of her clinic completely due to the loss of income and struggling to pay bills. On her GoFundMe page, she talked about the fact that she would have to give up her California license as this whole situation kind of fell apart over the issue, and for a situation that never resulted in any patient harm. If you read her side of the story, she talks about how she never represented herself as a physician, that she had worked with a physician who encouraged her to embrace her doctoral degree, that patients were proud of her academic achievements and referred to her as doctor, and that she was proud to be a nurse practitioner, and that she had in no way attempted to misrepresent herself. I think it's important to note that she was under the California Medical Practice Act, or under that act, individuals cannot refer to themselves as doctor, physician, or any other term or letters indicating or implying that he or she is a physician or surgeon without having a certificate as a physician or surgeon. So that was what was the rule for the land that she was working in. And so based on her behavior, that created a target, which she feels like she's being singled out. And I kind of agree with her, right? Like, there's a lot of other healthcare providers that go by doctor. So why her? Maybe, unfortunately, she's being made as an example, and that's exactly what's happened. But since that point, 3 California nurse practitioners with their doctorates have decided to sue the state of California over the law that it only allows physicians to call themselves doctors, saying it violates their First Amendment right to use the honorific title without fear of regulatory repercussions. These NPs and their representation believe that the years NPs spend earning their advanced degrees and qualifications should be able to speak truthfully about them in their workplace, on their business cards, internet, social media, as long as they clarify that they are nurse practitioners. So, first thing to take home immediately is pay attention to the laws of the land where you practice, okay? So, just because you feel a certain way about something doesn't mean that you aren't operating in a land where the law says something very differently than how you feel. So I think that's pretty much the immediate take-home message from that. Another thing to note is that even here in Florida, interestingly, Florida legislatures recently passed a bill to prevent advanced practice nurses from calling themselves doctor, reserving it only for MDs and DOs, which is interesting because DOs are not MDs. So I don't understand how that is allowed, but okay, yeah. So yeah, MDs and DOs can use it, but Governor Ron DeSantis vetoed it last month. So at the time of this writing, and this was another article that I will post in the show notes that you guys can access about what these nurse practitioners are doing. I'm actually very happy that they are attempting to fight this. It feels very targeted towards nurse practitioners, and this is an attempt to control nurse practitioners, and I think that they should fight it. I do think this is encroaching on freedom of speech. So, and it's not like they are saying something that's not true. I want to kind of start with what is the doctorate of nursing, because so many people ask me, so I could just get a master's degree and do what a nurse practitioner does. Why do I need the doctorate? And I've actually debated both sides of this coin, right? I've actually said on my podcast that I think the doctorate of nursing is not necessarily quote unquote useful if you don't want to climb the corporate ladder. And I've said, as somebody that has gotten a doctoral degree, I have a level of regret because I have discovered through my time that I don't necessarily want to climb that corporate ladder at this stage of my life. I have a level of regret with the time that I spent getting it over that issue. However, the work was still done, right? And so even though I may look at it differently now as I've spent time kind of pursuing the more entrepreneurial route in the time that it took me to get the doctoral degree, it still doesn't take away from the work, right? So that's one thing I'll say. What is a doctorate of nursing? The doctorate of nursing prepares nurse leaders at the highest level of nursing practice to improve patient outcomes and translate research into practice. So we have said this before, probably on the podcast. If I haven't, it's the first time saying it, that sometimes it can take in the neighborhood of 17 years for research to get to the clinical practice. So they could be a research showing that hand washing is good at stopping the spread of infection. And then it can take another 17 years for that to actually get to your doctor's office. I don't think I'd want to wait 17 years to have research come to me that has already been shown for something to be effective. So the DNP is that bridge, is kind of how they described the degree to me when I was approaching it. The DNP builds on the traditional master's program by providing content in evidence-based practice, quality improvement, systems leadership, among other key areas. The DNP is designed for nurses seeking a terminal degree in the nursing practice and offers an alternative to research-focused doctoral programs. The DNP nurses are well equipped to implement the science developed by nurse researchers prepared in the PhD and other doctoral research-focused nursing doctorates. About 72,000 out of the almost 355,000 NPs have a doctoral degree. And this number will only grow. So the discussion needs to be had sooner rather than later. The most common argument that I have heard regarding nurse practitioners using the doctorate in clinical practice is that it confuses patients. Now, this means that when a nurse practitioner comes in and says that she is Dr. Sandra Pagenta, a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner, that by using that statement, that is going to confuse patients and they're going to think that the nurse practitioner is a physician. And I'm really beginning to believe that that is a red herring for what MDs are really concerned about, which is scope reach by nurse practitioners. However, it has been my experience, and hopefully yours as well, that NPs do not think of themselves as physicians. We have a very different approach to patient care that is complementary to the medical model, not adversarial. I find that most NPs are well versed on their scope of practice, and I, for one, never want to represent myself as a medical doctor. Their schooling and training is completely different, and their knowledge base about their specialties more expansive than our education. However, our education does not take away from theirs, but serves to enhance the healthcare system overall. DNPs are that bridge from the research knowledge to clinical practice, and therefore doctors should see doctorally prepared nurse practitioners not as a threat to the word doctor, but as a welcome, strong addition to the healthcare team. As a side note, I think that most of the time patients struggle with who they saw at almost any clinic or hospital visit. I think it's a big stretch to assume that the 72,000 doctorally prepared NPs are to blame for patient confusion at the bedside. Especially when you're in the hospital setting, there are 5 different professionals who enter your room wearing the same set of scrubs in almost a similar hurried fashion to see the next patient. and barely have time to introduce themselves. And I think that that was more likely to be the cause of the confusion between a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner versus a physician. And I'll even say this, which might be a little bit uncomfortable. I think that the compensation that doctors receive for the work that they do instead of the title of doctor is more telling of the work that they do. Doctors do a very specialized work, and they should receive a high level of compensation. They spend a lot of time pursuing this degree in medical school, fellowships, residencies. They do not compare to the work that the nurse practitioner does. And therefore, the compensation that a doctor receives compared to a nurse practitioner is completely different and should be. I think fighting over the title of doctor is a wasteful use of time. And I think that their compensation better reflects what they provide as a part of the healthcare team than the title doctor. Now, my other point is that we are not the only profession to use doctor. So who else uses the term doctor? There are many professions that call themselves doctor. Dentists, veterinarians to start, but we also have doctorates in physical therapy, DOs, PharmDs, chiropractors, optometrists, naturopathic doctors, acupuncturists, psychologists. They all call themselves doctor. And lawyers, they earn a Juris Doctorate. So I believe the term doctor is a shared term, and therefore any person who's completed a doctoral level of work should be recognized as such, period. And if we peel back this respect for NPs because it's just easy to silence nurses, then it should be dismantled for other doctorally prepared professions, because we would hate to confuse a veterinarian with a medical doctor. And more importantly, the compensation that a physician receives compared to a nurse practitioner is signal and sign enough that what they do is more expertise, more skilled, and requires a different level of education that we don't have. So the term doctor doesn't detract from that work. It doesn't detract from what it is that everyone knows that you're doing. Why does this matter? All right. You're like, Sandra, you've been going on and on. It's been 20 minutes. Why does this matter? It matters because I believe that nurses spend a great deal of their time in their careers explaining to other health professionals why they belong somewhere, from the boardroom to a patient's room. And that needs to stop. NPs are a valued part of the healthcare team, master's prepared or doctorally prepared. We are not in competition with physicians, and it feels that this is a targeted attack on NPs to not use the title of doctor to silence our achievements. I think the bigger overarching thing we should focus on is how we can work collaboratively to bring about the best patient outcomes. Who doesn't want a team of doctorally prepared healthcare professionals working to keep them well? This argument has actually brought more division within the healthcare team. Now, other nurse practitioners are speaking up. I'm seeing on social media, they're speaking up against nurse practitioners that are using the term doctorate. And then others are saying, no, it's what I deserved. And so it's creating fighting instead of adding to us becoming a cohesive team. I just want for nurse practitioners to be proud and supportive of our colleagues that pursue doctoral degrees and to honor the work that they've done and to join us, because the more that we are educated as a profession, the better the outcomes are for our patients. An often cited study in 2014 developed by the Center of Healthcare Outcomes and Policy Research at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia notes that for every 10% increase in the number of nurses with a BSN, there's a 7% decline in mortality following common surgery. I know this doesn't directly speak to the DNPs, but the reasoning isn't a far stretch. The more educated a profession is, the better the outcomes are for the patient. And isn't that what we're here for, the patients? And so I don't believe that a nurse practitioner calling herself doctor and explaining that she's a nurse practitioner to the patient is going to bring about poor outcomes for the patient. And I think that's the part that needs to be the focus. and not so much the fact that you think that it's going to confuse a patient by a nurse practitioner explaining that she has her doctoral degree. I don't agree. But I don't necessarily know if that's even really the heart of what we should be arguing about. Because personally, I don't require my patients to call me doctor or my coworkers. I have in no way demanded that. And I am honored that a lot of the nurses that I work with, when they find out that I have a doctoral degree, call me Dr. Pagenta without me even asking. Most physicians I work with are surprised to find out that I do carry a doctorate since I don't share it. The Doctor Nurse podcast title is me directly stating I'm a doctor nurse because I always want to express that I am a doctor nurse, not a doctor physician. So NPs, learn the rules of where you practice so that you don't end up like our colleague, being punished by the system. And I wish that those NPs suing California the best of luck because they're fighting for all of us. So, what do you think? Have I made a decent argument about this? If not, tell me. I want to hear from you all. I'm wanting educated discussion, not mean or unkind statements. So if you've got those, keep them. But if you have a valid point, something that I can talk about, something that I can think about, please share it with me, because I believe the measure of a man is not someone that keeps one side of a position, but that's somebody that can take two opposing views and argue them out and let them wrestle around in his head. I mean, that's why we pursue higher education. Guys, we pursue higher education to be educated, to learn how to think. And that process of thinking means that you debate ideas within yourself. And that's what you go to school to learn. I want to hear what you have to say. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I feel good having put this to bed and said how I feel. And again, this does not take away from master's prepared nurse practitioners whatsoever. And I need to make sure I say that caveat, because I don't want master's degree nurse practitioners coming after me, because I do believe that there are master's prepared nurse practitioners that are incredibly strong and never need a doctorate a single day of their career. I believe that 100%. But I also don't want to take away from those who have that degree. I'm trying to balance it all here. And I don't believe that you have to have a doctorate, but I believe that those who get it deserve the respect, because it was work to get it done. It was work. It was time. And as I talk about all the time on this podcast, your time is precious. You only get so much of it. So if you choose to spend it pursuing something for that title, then we deserve to honor the time. And physicians are not any more special than we are. We are all people that spent the time pursuing a doctoral degree. So we deserve to be honored. And I think that for everyone, even though I don't seek that honoring for myself, I believe that those who do the work deserve the honor. So, all right, guys, I promise I'm done. I'm done talking. And as I always say, make sure to enjoy the journey of your career as whatever degree and level of nurse that you have chosen to be, because none of it's right, none of it's wrong. It's all a choice, and it's all the time and the energy you put towards your certifications and your degrees. And the whole point of the podcast is to show you that no matter what you chose, there's something in nursing for you. So yeah, what a beautiful decision you made to become a nurse. All right, guys, be well.